The biting chill of the Colorado winter evening tore through Abigail Peterson's threadbare coat as her father's wagon disappeared into the darkening horizon, leaving her alone on the desolate trail between mining towns. It was 1876, and at 18 years old, she found herself abandoned like unwanted cargo, with nothing but the small carpet bag containing her meager possessions and her mother's tarnished locket around her neck. "Come back," she called out, her voice breaking as she stumbled after the wagon. But Thomas Peterson, drunk on cheap whiskey and bitterness, never looked back. The bottle had become his constant companion after her mother died of tuberculosis 6 months ago, and tonight his drunken rage had culminated in this final act of cruelty. Abigail sank to her knees in the dirt road, the last crimson rays of sunset casting long shadows across the landscape. The mining town of Silver Creek lay 5 miles behind her, and Timberline, their intended destination, was still 8 miles ahead. With darkness falling fast and temperatures dropping, she knew she couldn't remain in the open. Rising shakily to her feet, she picked up her bag and began walking toward Timberline. Her father had been seeking work in the new silver mines there, though Abigail suspected the saloons were his true destination. Now she had no choice but to follow, hoping to find shelter before nightfall. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her heart race. Travelers on this road weren't always friendly, especially to a young woman alone. Frantically, she looked for somewhere to hide, but the sparse landscape offered little cover. The rider crested the hill behind her, his silhouette tall and imposing against the darkening sky. "Miss, you all right out here?" The voice was deep but gentle, tinged with a southern drawl. Abigail turned, clutching her bag defensively. The man astride the chestnut stallion wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, his face shadowed in the fading light. A sheepskin coat hugged broad shoulders, and she could make out the gleam of a star-shaped badge pinned to his chest. "I'm fine, sir," she answered, though her trembling voice betrayed her. The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, keeping a respectful distance. "Forgive my intrusion, madam, but these roads ain't safe after dark, especially not for a lady alone." He pushed his hat back, revealing a weathered face with kind eyes. "Name's Kieran Pullman. I'm the deputy sheriff from Timberline." Relief washed over her, though caution remained. "Abigail Peterson," she offered, hesitating before adding. "My father and I were traveling to Timberline, but we got separated." Deputy Pullman's eyes narrowed slightly, taking in her disheveled appearance and the single small bag at her feet. "Separated, you say?" His gaze followed the wagon tracks leading away. "Seems to me like someone left in quite a hurry." Abigail felt heat rising to her cheeks. The shame of being abandoned was almost worse than the abandonment itself. "He's been drinking since my mother passed. Tonight was worse than usual." The deputy's expression softened. "I'm mighty sorry to hear that, Miss Peterson." He glanced at the darkening sky. "Night's coming fast, and it'll be below freezing soon. Timberline's still a fair piece away. Would you permit me to escort you there?" Abigail hesitated, weighing her limited options. She'd been raised to be wary of strange men, but her circumstances were dire. "I would be grateful, deputy." Kieran Pullman nodded, then led his horse closer. "This here's Rusty," he said, patting the chestnut's neck. "He's strong enough to carry us both to town." He secured her carpet bag to his saddle before offering his hand. "May I?" With a nod, Abigail allowed him to help her onto the horse before he swung up behind her. His presence was solid and reassuring at her back, though she sat stiffly, unaccustomed to such proximity with a man who wasn't family. "You can lean back if you're tired," he said, his voice rumbling near her ear. "It's been a long day for you, I reckon." As they rode through the gathering darkness, Abigail gradually relaxed against the deputy's chest. The steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the warmth radiating from the man behind her lulled her into an exhausted daze. "My father wasn't always like this," she found herself saying. "Before Mother fell ill, he was different. Kinder." Kieran listened quietly as she spoke of her childhood in Pennsylvania, her father's work as a carpenter, and their journey west after her mother's death. Thomas Peterson had been chasing rumors of easy fortunes in Colorado's silver mines, dragging Abigail from town to town. "Grief changes people," Kieran said finally. "Some find their way back from it. Others get lost in the darkness." The lights of Timberline appeared in the distance, a scattering of golden pinpricks against the black canvas of night. As they drew closer, Abigail could make out the silhouettes of buildings, a church steeple, the blocky shapes of storefronts, and the taller structure of what appeared to be a hotel. "First thing we need is to get you somewhere warm for the night," Kieran said as they rode into town. "Mrs. Holloway runs the boarding house. She's a good woman, takes in strays now and then." Abigail bristled slightly at being called a stray, though she supposed that's exactly what she was now. The boarding house was a two-story building with a wide porch and windows glowing with lamplight. Mrs. Holloway, a plump woman with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes, answered Kieran's knock promptly. "Deputy Pullman," she greeted him. Then her gaze shifted to Abigail. "And who might this young lady be?" "This is Miss Abigail Peterson," Kieran explained. "She's had some trouble on the road and needs lodging for the night. I was hoping you might have a room available." Mrs. Holloway's scrutinizing gaze softened somewhat. "I do have one small room left. Come in, child, before you catch your death." Inside, the boarding house was warm and smelled of baking bread. Abigail followed Mrs. Holloway to a snug parlor, while Kieran excused himself to stable his horse, promising to return shortly. "Now," Mrs. Holloway said once they were seated, "perhaps you'd like to tell me what really happened. Deputy Pullman is too much of a gentleman to pry, but I've no such compunctions." Abigail found herself telling the older woman everything: her mother's death, her father's descent into alcoholism, and finally, his abandonment of her on the road. "Men," Mrs. Holloway sniffed dismissively. "Present company accepted," she added as Kieran returned, stamping snow from his boots in the entryway. "Miss Peterson will be staying with us for a while," she informed him. "And I won't hear a word about payment until she's found her feet." "That's mighty generous, Mrs. Holloway," Kieran said, removing his hat as he entered the parlor. "Not generosity, just common decency," the older woman replied. "Now, I expect you'll want to keep an eye out for her father?" Kieran nodded, his expression hardening slightly. "I'll ask around town and send word to Sheriff Colton in Silver Creek to watch for him as well." The thought of facing her father again made Abigail's stomach twist with anxiety. "What will happen if you find him?" "That depends on him," Kieran answered honestly. "Abandoning a young woman on a deserted road in winter. Well, that's not something I can overlook. But my main concern right now is making sure you're safe." After Kieran left, Mrs. Holloway showed Abigail to a small but clean room on the second floor. There was a narrow bed with a colorful quilt, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a small window overlooking the main street. "Get some rest, dear," Mrs. Holloway said. "Things often look clearer in the morning light." But morning brought no clarity, only the stark reality of her situation. Abigail had no money, no family, and no prospects in a town where she knew no one except a kind deputy and her landlady. After breakfast, Mrs. Holloway introduced her to the other boarders, two elderly sisters who taught at the local school, a young clerk who worked at the mercantile, and a widow who kept books for several businesses in town. "You'll need work," Mrs. Holloway stated practically. "Can you cook? Clean? Any skills to speak of?" "I can sew quite well," Abigail offered. "My mother taught me dressmaking." Mrs. Holloway nodded approvingly. "Mrs. Finch at the general store might have some mending work for you. And I believe Mrs. Wallace was looking for someone to help with her younger children's clothes." By midday, Abigail had secured enough piecework to begin paying for her room and board. She was returning from Mrs. Wallace's home when she encountered Kieran on the street. He tipped his hat in greeting, a smile warming his features. "Miss Peterson, good to see you settling in." "Deputy Pullman, I was just arranging some sewing work with Mrs. Wallace." "Glad to hear it." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you care to join me for coffee at the cafe? I'd like to update you on my inquiries about your father." The cafe was a small establishment with checkered tablecloths and windows steamed from the heat inside. They found a quiet table in the corner, and the proprietress brought them coffee and slices of apple pie. "I spoke with several people who remembered seeing your father in Silver Creek," Kieran began once they were settled. "He apparently lost quite a bit of money gambling before he left. No one's seen him in Timberline yet." Abigail stared into her coffee cup. "Do you think he might have continued on to another town?" "It's possible. There are mining camps scattered all through these mountains." Kieran's voice gentled. "Miss Peterson, Abigail, You should prepare yourself for the possibility that he may not come back for you. I know, she whispered. I think I knew at the moment he drove away. Kieran reached across the table, his rough hand covering hers briefly. You're not alone here. Timberline takes care of its own. Over the following weeks, Abigail gradually adjusted to life in Timberline. Her sewing skills earned her a reputation, and soon she had more work than she could handle alone. Mrs. Holloway helped her convert a small room at the back of the boarding house into a workspace. Kieran became a regular visitor, initially under the pretense of updating her about the search for her father, though his inquiries seemed to grow less urgent as time passed. Soon, he was simply stopping by to see how she was faring or bringing her interesting books from his own small collection. Winter deepened, blanketing the town in snow and ice. On Christmas Eve, Kieran invited Abigail to attend the town gathering at the church. The whole town will be there, he explained. Singing carols, exchanging small gifts. It would be a shame for you to miss it. The church was decorated with evergreen boughs and candles, filling the space with fragrant warmth. Abigail wore her best dress, carefully mended and adorned with new lace collars she'd made herself. When Kieran saw her, something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes that made her heart beat faster. You look beautiful, he said simply. As they joined in singing carols, Abigail felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced since her mother died. Afterward, standing in the snowy churchyard under a sky brilliant with stars, Kieran handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Merry Christmas, Abigail. Inside was a delicate silver thimble and a set of fine sewing needles in a mother-of-pearl case. Kieran, this is too much, she protested. Not nearly enough, he replied softly. You've brought something to this town to me that I didn't even know was missing. His words hung in the cold air between them, loaded with meaning. Before she could respond, Mrs. Holloway called her name, breaking the moment. As winter began to thaw into spring, Abigail's business flourished. She saved enough to rent a small storefront on Main Street, converting it into a proper dressmaking shop. Kieran helped her move her sewing equipment and fabric, spending an entire Sunday building shelves and a counter. You're good with your hands, she observed as he fitted the last shelf into place. Carpentry was my father's trade, he explained. I worked alongside him until I was 17, then the war came. A shadow passed over his face. After that, I drifted west and eventually found my place here. They were interrupted by Sheriff Colton from Silver Creek, who entered the shop with his hat in his hands. Deputy Pullman, Miss Peterson, he greeted them solemnly. Abigail's heart stuttered. Have you found my father? The sheriff's expression told her everything before he spoke. I'm afraid so, miss. He was found yesterday in a ravine about 20 miles west of Silver Creek. His wagon went off the trail in the night. I'm sorry. The news hit her like a physical blow. Despite everything, Thomas Peterson had been her father, her last living blood relative. Kieran was at her side instantly, his hand steady on her arm. Was he? Do you know if it was quick? She managed to ask. The doctor believes so, Sheriff Colton assured her. There's some paperwork that needs attending to when you're ready, and his personal effects. Kieran stepped forward. I'll handle the arrangements, Sheriff. Miss Peterson needs time. Later, alone in her room at the boarding house, Abigail finally allowed herself to cry not just for her father's death, but for the father she'd lost long before, the man who had taught her to ride a bicycle and read her bedtime stories, who had been consumed by grief and alcohol until nothing remained of the person he once was. A soft knock at her door roused her from her thoughts. Kieran stood in the hallway, concern etched on his features. I brought you some tea, he said, offering a steaming cup. She accepted it gratefully, moving aside to let him enter. They sat in silence for a time, the only sound the ticking of the small clock on her bedside table. I keep thinking about the last time I saw him, Abigail finally said. He was so angry, so lost. I wish. You wish you could have saved him, Kieran finished for her. Some people can't be saved, Abigail. Not until they're ready to save themselves. Is that what happened to you? She asked quietly. You saved yourself? A sad smile touched his lips. In a manner of speaking. After the war, I was adrift, angry at a world that seemed senseless. I drank too much, fought too easily. He glanced down at his hands. Then one night in a Kansas town, I stepped between a drunk and the woman he was threatening. Turned out that drunk was the mayor's son, and the woman was the sheriff's daughter. The sheriff offered me a job instead of jail time. He saw something in you worth saving, Abigail observed. Just as I saw something in you that night on the road, Kieran replied, his eyes meeting hers. Strength, courage, even in your darkest moment. In the days that followed, Abigail sorted through her father's meager possessions, a worn Bible with her mother's name inscribed inside, a pocket watch that no longer worked, a few items of clothing, and a letter addressed to her that she couldn't bring herself to open immediately. When she finally did read it, sitting beside the creek that gave the neighboring town its name, she found her father's shaky handwriting confessing his shame and regret. He'd written it the day before his death, apparently planning to mail it from the next town. I have failed you in every way a father can fail a daughter, he had written. The man your mother loved died with her, and what remains is a coward who cannot face his own grief, let alone help you through yours. You deserve better than what I have become. Perhaps someday you will find it in your heart to forgive me, though I cannot forgive myself. The letter changed nothing and everything. Her father was still gone, but the anger she'd carried since that night on the road began to loosen its grip on her heart. Spring bloomed fully across the mountain landscape, bringing new growth and possibilities. Abigail's dress shop prospered, with orders coming in from as far away as Denver. Her small apartment above the shop became a cozy home, filled with fabrics, books borrowed from Kieran, and wildflowers he brought her on his daily rounds. They fell into an easy rhythm, coffee together in the mornings before he began his duties, Sunday picnics by the creek, when weather permitted, evenings on her small balcony, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson. On a warm June evening, as they walked back from such a picnic, Kieran suddenly stopped in the middle of the path. Abigail, he said, his voice unusually serious. There's something I need to tell you. Her heart constricted with sudden fear. What is it? I've been offered the position of sheriff in Silver Creek. Sheriff Colton is retiring at the end of the month. Oh, the word fell from her lips, heavy with disappointment. Silver Creek was only 13 miles away, but it might as well have been 100. That's a wonderful opportunity. Kieran studied her face. I haven't accepted yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Why? The question came out more sharply than she intended. Because my future is tied to yours, Abigail Peterson. At least, I hope it is. He took her hands in his. I love you. I think I've loved you since the moment I found you on that road, standing tall despite being broken inside. Abigail's breath caught in her throat. Kieran, I'm not asking you to leave Timberline, he continued quickly. I'll turn down the offer. Or we could split our time between the towns. Or, she silenced him by pressing her fingers to his lips. I love you too, she said simply. And I would follow you anywhere. Relief and joy transformed his features. I was hoping you might say that. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch. I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Inside the pouch was a delicate gold ring with a small pearl set in the center. It was my mother's, he explained. She gave it to me before she died, said to save it for the woman who made me want to be a better man. And do I? Abigail asked softly. Make you want to be better? Every day, he answered, his voice rough with emotion. Abigail Peterson, will you marry me? Yes, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. Yes, I will. They were married in Timberline's small church on a perfect August day, with Mrs. Holloway sniffling proudly in the front pew and half the town in attendance. Abigail wore a gown of ivory silk that had taken her weeks to create, and Kieran looked handsome in a new black suit, his badge polished to a high shine. After the ceremony, as they greeted their well-wishers, an older man in a dusty trail coat approached them hesitantly. Sheriff Pullman? Mrs. Pullman? I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, Kieran replied, though his arm tightened protectively around Abigail's waist. My name's William Jennings. I knew Thomas Peterson years back in Pennsylvania, before his wife took ill. The man's weathered face creased with genuine sorrow. I was mighty sorry to hear of his passing. Thomas wasn't always the man he became at the end. You knew my father when I was a child? Abigail asked, surprised. William nodded. Worked alongside him for nearly 10 years. He was a fine carpenter and a good friend. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small wooden box. Found this among his things after the accident. The sheriff in Silver Creek said you were the one to claim it. I've been holding on to it, hoping to find you." The box was exquisitely crafted of cherry wood, with her initials inlaid in maple on the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was her mother's wedding ring and a miniature portrait of her parents on their wedding day. "He made this box for your 18th birthday," William explained. "Had it with him when? Well, when you were separated. Asked me to make sure you got it, if anything happened to him." Fresh tears filled Abigail's eyes as she traced the fine craftsmanship of the box. Even in his darkest days, some part of her father had remembered his love for her. "Thank you, Mr. Jennings," Kieran said, supporting his emotional bride. "This means more than you can know." As their wedding day drew to a close, Kieran led Abigail to a small cottage on the outskirts of town, their new home. He explained, purchased with his savings and furnished in secret with the help of Mrs. Holloway and the townspeople. "I thought we'd be living in Silver Creek," Abigail said, confused but delighted by the surprise. Kieran smiled, drawing her into his arms. "I turned down the sheriff position. But why? It was such an opportunity. Some opportunities come at too high a price," he explained. Sheriff Colton understood. "He's recommended me to replace Sheriff Wilson here in Timberline when he retires next year." "You did this for me?" Abigail asked, touched beyond words. "For us," Kieran corrected gently. "This is where our story began, on that cold road outside of town. This is where I found you, where I lifted you up and promised myself I would never let you fall again." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting their new home in golden light, Abigail stood in the circle of her husband's arms, marveling at how a moment of abandonment had led her to such profound belonging. "You called me yours that night," she remembered, "even before you knew my name. And I meant it," Kieran said, his lips finding hers in a tender kiss. "I'll always mean it." 5 years later, on a bright autumn afternoon, Abigail sat on the porch of their expanded cottage, watching Kieran, now Sheriff Pullman, teaching their 4-year-old son Thomas to ride his first pony in the meadow beyond their garden. Their 2-year-old daughter Catherine played at her feet, arranging wooden blocks in elaborate patterns. The dress shop in town now employed 3 seamstresses and had a reputation throughout Colorado territory. Abigail still designed the more elaborate gowns herself, but her growing family had become her primary focus. Mrs. Holloway, now in her 70s but still spry, emerged from the house carrying a tray of lemonade. "Those children are the spitting image of their father," she observed fondly. "Except for Thomas's eyes, those are yours through and through." Abigail smiled, watching her son's delighted face as the pony trotted in a gentle circle, Kieran's steady hand on the lead rope. "It's strange how life unfolds, isn't it? If my father hadn't left me on that road that night, then Kieran wouldn't have found you," Mrs. Holloway finished. "Though I suspect the two of you would have found each other somehow. Some people are meant to be, no matter what roads they travel." From the meadow, Kieran looked up and caught Abigail's eye, his smile as warm and reassuring as it had been that first night. He lifted their son from the pony's back and set him on his shoulders, heading toward the porch and the family that had become the center of his world. Abigail rose to meet them, her heart full. From abandonment had come belonging. From loss had come love. From that desolate road had come the journey of a lifetime. And it was a journey that, even after all these years, was only just beginning.